All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to what we're calling Life After COVID, an in-depth commercial real estate discussion. Although the name, we probably jumped the gun a little bit on that. We're certainly not after COVID, but we'll talk about that in more detail here over the next hour. My name is Lee Small, and for those of you who do not know me, I'm the Vice President of National Business Development for MBL Title. Some other members of our team are on as well, including Founder and Chief Officer Matthew Lopez, and founder, CFO, and CEO John Myers. I'd also like to give Anita Guillory from our team a huge shout out for the get-go. She has worked tirelessly on so many things behind the scenes. You've gotten a bunch of emails from her, making sure everything's worked out and on top of things. So just wanted to acknowledge all of her hard work as well. So unfortunately, Texas had a new high in COVID cases yesterday. Now elective surgeries actually were just postponed in some of the biggest counties in Texas. So things are ratcheting back up, but we're very excited to have the next hour to discuss the ongoing coronavirus pandemic and specific commercial real estate matters with these four gentlemen. And I'll start with a brief introduction, even though many of you know them very well. And we'll start with Kristian Teleki, who is the Senior Vice President of Matthews Southwest, a real estate company based in Lewisville, Texas, with 7 offices in Texas and Canada. He's been with the firm for over 20 years. During his time, Kristian has taken a lead role in projects such as Southside on Lamar, the Canvas Hotel, Old Dallas High School, and the Dallas Omni Hotel. In addition, Kristian oversees the team that is developing the 1,600-acre Tribute Master Plan community in the Colony, Texas. Ben Brewer is the managing director for Hines and oversees the Dallas-Fort Worth office. He spent the last 14 years with the firm and is in the midst of some major projects like DAC and D Bellum, which is a 16-story office development. Also the Victor in Victory Park, which is a 39-story multifamily project, and the redevelopment of the Maple Terraces, which Hines acquired in January 2020. Ben has also been responsible for the development of over 8,000 single-family lots. The Hines office is currently working on 20 projects across DFW, spanning office, multifamily, industrial, single-family, and self-storage. Colin Fitzgibbons is president of Hunt Realty Investments, where he joined in February of 2020, just a couple months ago. Fitzgibbons is currently overseeing 3 transformational projects around DFW, which include the Fields mixed-use development on 2,500 acres in Frisco. That site will feature single-family, multifamily, commercial space, and be the new headquarters for the PGA of America. Fitzgibbons is also working to redevelop the North End Apartments on 11 acres in Uptown. Last but certainly not least, Hunt still owns 21 acres around historic Reunion Tower. And of course, prior to joining Hunt, Colin was with KDC, where he worked on the City Line project and the Legacy West development in Plano. And finally, last but certainly not least, Perry Kaufman, partner in charge of Texas for Armanino, which is a top 25 CPA and consulting firm in the nation. He works most frequently with clients having annual revenues ranging from $10 million to $100 million. His areas of expertise include tax planning and compliance, business, financial, and tax implications of mergers and acquisitions, business entity, and growth planning. Perry will help us understand the recently passed CARES Act and some of the details that are important for real estate professionals to be aware of. So great to have everybody here. Look forward to a very interesting discussion. One quick note for everybody who is on the conference and wants to ask a question. We're going to be taking all the questions using the Q&A chat feature at the bottom of the screen. I'll be monitoring that as we go along so we don't have any audio feedback issues. If you have a question throughout our conversation, please feel free to drop it in there. I'll read it off when it's appropriate or if it fits into the conversation. We'll also have some time at the end to focus on questions. So great group. Let's jump right in. And Colin, I mentioned your timing of joining up, moving from KDC over to Hunt. Obviously, you don't expect a global pandemic to kick in. Things were looking great early on in 2020, and then COVID comes around. And I just want to know, kind of from the start, if that changed anything from you as you got up and running. Obviously, you couldn't be in the office and go through the normal routine of meeting people, but how, if at all, that changed your transition to being the president over at Hunt?
Yeah, perfect timing, right? Right in time for a global pandemic and an oil crash and a stock market. At the time, the stock market was going down, but it's turned out okay. I think our little environment is kind of like what's happening in the broader world. Everything has just had to accelerate, and via technology, whatever trends were kind of already happening, were happening to us, and we had to just go faster using technology. So yeah, I worked for Hunt now longer from home than I have from the office, and just about the time that I felt like I had met everybody and figured out where everything was, March 13th hit and we got sent home. So, such is life, but Zoom and Teams is the new normal now. And, we had to deal with some issues just like everybody else, but there's some good stuff happening as a result that we'll talk about later. But, all in all, we've kind of muddled our way through.
Yeah. Good. Well, congrats on the move again. It's exciting to see what you guys are working on. We'll get into more of that here in a minute. And speaking of some major projects, Ben, want to bring you in to talk about the Stack, which is a really cool office building you guys are developing in Deep Ellum. Broke ground just pre-COVID, and obviously the office environment and how we see office in this country now, I think is going to change a little bit, and would love to first of all hear an update from you on how things are coming along on the Stack, and then also how COVID has impacted discussions internally at Hines about how you guys set up that building for leasing.
Yeah, well, Lee, thanks for having me, and the whole MBL title team, thanks for putting this together. Yeah, we're really excited about the Stack Deep Ellum. It's delivering in early 2021. And it's really a unique opportunity. It's really rare to have an office building that's in the core of Deep Ellum. It's an 8-block radius neighborhood. And it's 200,000 square feet, like I think you said, and ground floor retail. But one of the key attributes for us was that it's in the Sun Belt markets. It's really, in our company's history, one of the highest walk scores we've had to date. And so just all the offerings it provides. But yeah, even through the design and, like you said, our construction currently, we've been talking about COVID, and we continue to refine some of the plans and offerings to account for that. I mean, aside from the HVAC improvements, such as like air purges and upgraded filters and ionization, we also looked at the touchless access panels and how that can be integrated into the building. But really, what we've done in addition to that is through tenant surveys of our existing tenants in our buildings across the firm, is that we've kind of asked them, what are you looking to achieve in your spaces? And you kind of go back to the first question is, what can they do to provide more flexibility and have their employees be able to collaborate in a flexible environment? And that's a very ambiguous term, and we're all trying to define it. But I think it puts an emphasis on the amenity areas, and so there's a relationship between the amenities and the tenant spaces. And so for the Stack, we'll have a 10th floor amenity deck that's 270-degree views of downtown. And what we did is we put a special emphasis on the wellness factor and the fitness factor. And so that'll have the first really outdoor-indoor fitness facility on the upper floor. So that'll be on the 10th floor as well. And then going back to the COVID talk, firm-wide, we've developed more than 900 office buildings, and this is really unique with COVID. And so there's been a lot of discussion going on, and we've asked ourselves, and we've asked tenants, tell us what you're trying to accomplish with your office space. And the office platform allows for, a collaborative environment, companies to be creative, and it starts with recruiting. And our DFW office, we've had 2 individuals that have started during COVID, and really a lot of their last interviews were via Zoom like this. And technology is great, but it's just really hard to connect. And so I think that's one of the big things. One of the questions they ask on the interviews is, tell me about your culture. And it's really hard to create that culture remotely. And so I think the key takeaway from all this is that executives are looking for flexibility in their real estate, both from their people and their offices. And it could be more of a hub and spoke system. Like we've been doing that for a long time, but that's going to evolve, and every company is different, is the feedback we've gotten. and it depends on the roles of those individuals and how they can integrate. But I'll just conclude on a positive side. I think that could also create some more different types of culture experiences with companies and those individuals to have those dedicated connected moments. But it's still evolving, and it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out.
Yeah, and Perry, you had, talking to you earlier this week, you have a personal anecdote from Armanino actually, with your lease, and if you could get into kind of the process of, you're one of the companies that their lease was coming up and you're about to re-sign as COVID's going on, and how that changed your plans for the coming, next couple months and years.
Yeah, so it was a weird sequence of events. Our lease it terminates at the end of 20, and we had spent, it seemed like almost a year evaluating options and deciding what we wanted to do. And we were coming to terms with our existing landlord, Tollway Plaza at Keller Springs and Tollway, at the beginning of March, and really finalized our agreement. And then all of a sudden, shelter in place took hold. And we were presented with the lease actually to sign the day before we went to shelter in place. So I serve on our firm's executive committee, and the 9 of us, looked at this with all that was unfolding. And it really caused us to kind of hit the pause button for a second, as so many people did, trying to figure out where we were going. And ultimately, we, engaged and had a little bit more conversation and executed our lease. And of course, we were all working from home at the time, and we thought to ourselves, well, we had a system of kind of rotating around and accommodating for the construction, but we decided to go ahead and not even reoccupy. So right now we have some temporary space. Most of our folks are continuing to work at home. We went ahead forward with our plans pretty much as they were, because they were really centered around the fact that we have always had people working remotely for periods of time. So we weren't uncomfortable with that, but what we did find out is that long stretches of time without having kind of interaction directly in meetings and so forth is really different than working remotely for sporadic and being in the office once or twice a week or so forth. So we're still trying to problem solve that, but there's a lot of cultural and collaborative activities that you have to kind of try to sprinkle in and keep people pulled together.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what we're doing, and hopefully in the not too distant future, our new space will be ready and COVID will be a thing of the past, and we got to look for the good stuff.
Yeah. Well, and one of the really positive things, Kristian, talking to you as we prepared for this conference, that really blew me away, the discussion we had around the tribute and moving kind of to single family lot sales and development. The first 6 months of this year, pre-COVID, it was great. And then, very surprised to hear how strong, historically strong, they've been for you even through COVID. So I think that's a fascinating perspective that you can share on the single family side.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. It was really interesting to watch builder traffic that we get weekly. We develop the lots, we don't build the homes, but we aggregate the data that we get from the builders, traffic, sales, price per foot, square footage of homes. And it was truly, what we've experienced is really a V curve. Sudden drop off in February. Some sales occurred that we were tracking in March and April that were, you could see points dropping on speculative homes, obviously not on spec homes, not on new builds. And then really by May, once the governor started opening things up, it was fascinating to see traffic get back to, I'll call it pre-COVID numbers, even though, seasonally you'd expect it, a little less traffic in January, February, more traffic in May. But the price points were starting to shore back up to equivalent, pre-COVID, $200 a foot, mid-COVID or early mid-COVID, probably $180 a foot on average. And now hopefully at the back end of mid-COVID, we're sort of close to that $200 a foot range on home product, which is, it's quite encouraging to see and a little bit fascinating. And the other thing that we've seen out of the tribute is, and it happened during the same sort of 90, 120 day period, is a flurry of interest on land we have for a single family rental product. Developers coming to us saying we would like to buy anywhere from 12 to 25 acres to develop single family homes, but with the model to be to rent, which again, 18 months ago, nobody had heard of it. And there's this whole thinking of, with COVID, with job certainty, perhaps some uncertainty, is people still wanting to have the single family lifestyle, but maybe more in a less committed relationship, being a renter as opposed to a homeowner and a mortgage, and having that exposure. So it's sort of fascinating to watch that conversation.
Yeah. And Colin, I'm curious, with your, you guys have the largest contiguous block of land up in Frisco, over 2,500 acres. I'm curious, from also the single family side, I think you told me earlier that things had actually accelerated for you on the lot development. And also, if you could, chime in about the single family for rental homes as well, and how you see that possibly playing a role with your development.
Yeah, so I would say we got our zoning finalized in March, which was step one, and then maybe the path we set out on has gotten much faster in the last I would say 3 or 4 weeks, where we get a ton of demand for folks wanting to buy lots, individuals. And so now that's caused us to, maybe we were focused on one specific corner of the overall, a 200 acre section of the overall deal. Now we're looking at multiple at the same time. To Kristian's point before, multiple different price points, multiple different builders, but all of a sudden, there's just a ton of interest and activity up there that's causing us to go faster than we otherwise were. Single family for rent is something that we're exploring as well. There does seem to be quite a bit of demand, and that's again one of the other parallel paths that we're running all of a sudden to try to figure out, who the best group is to choose and which part of the development to put it. But again, there's just a ton of demand for that. So, with all the bad news that we've fought through, this is a bright spot for us.
Yeah, it's a fascinating part of the industry, and it's really picked up in interest even pre-COVID. So I think over time, the affordability aspect and people wanting to rent and still have that flexibility, but being a single family house is something that we'll only continue to see get greater. Perry, it's great to have you on. Taxes are not something people usually seek out information on, but this year taxes are incredibly important, especially with the CARES Act, and even more so on the real estate side because of some of the depreciation tables and how things have worked out. And you do a great job of talking about it and making it, interesting and also extremely relevant to the real estate people who are on this conference. So just a quick overview for us of how the CARES Act worked and what's the most meaningful portions for the real estate community.
Sure. So first, let me just, for a little bit of framework, clarify the fact that, real estate is one of our firm's largest industry focuses, and I've been working in the real estate space with probably 50% of my time throughout my career. So I've really been focused on understanding how the legislation influences the business. So with regard to the CARES Act, a couple of things I just want to mention. I'll kind of talk about the stimulus aspect of it and what it means in the real estate industry as we see it and we hear it from our clients, and then we'll get into the tax pieces as well. So on the stimulus side, everybody's heard so much about the payroll protection program, the PPP funding provisions. And a couple of things that people might not have understood is so much of it is disposably for employers of 500 and fewer employees. Well, technically, that's not always the case. There really are exceptions in the SBA regs that companies beyond that could qualify. And also, aside from that, the hospitality industry obviously was provided an exemption and can do that by location. But the biggest impact that we see on the real estate industry is really an indirect impact, meaning that it's those qualifying companies that are getting some funding that are helping them maintain their rental payments and compliance in their leases in a lot of cases. The biggest industry, of course, was multifamily that really benefited. We hear from all of our clients that 95% or greater of rental collections, where obviously in the retail and hospitality space, just the opposite. So PPP funding was a big deal. On the tax side of things, really, there was a desire to try to provide ability for more liquidity that's just in the economy. And in 2017, tax legislation had eliminated the ability to take operating losses in a current year and carry them back to recover prior year tax payments. That had always really been a part of the tax regime, but in 2017, they took that away. Well, here we are quickly, the beginning of 2020, they put it back in, and they put it back in on steroids. Historically, you could carry back maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years. Now, if you have an operating loss in a given year of 18, 19, or 20, you can use that to claim refunds going back 5 tax years. And that's really going to be applicable, I think, and sometimes when you have projects that have stalled during the lease-up phase and you're running some, taking longer to get to stabilization. So those type of losses very well could come into play and create some liquidity carrying back. Also, in 2017, going back to that tax legislation, there was an error in the drafting of the law that got actually passed. And there was a certain type of asset base that had been fit into the criteria for current deductibility. It's primarily leasehold improvements. And if they're 15-year or less recovery period, then you could take full deduction in the year of placing it in service. Well, the 2017 language in the statute messed that up, and it no longer qualified, which was a big hit to that type of investment, the leasehold improvements. So again, conveniently, the CARES Act came along that fixed the problem, because otherwise it would have required both houses of Congress to come to agreement on a bipartisan way, and that was not happening. So now these, what are known as qualified improvement properties, which is really leasehold improvements, current deductibility, again, tax benefit, providing some liquidity in the marketplace. There's some other more nuanced elements of it, but most of it is to allow for more either current deductibility or carry back for refund claims. And it's been very popular where it applies.
Great. Thanks for that overview, Perry. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
We got two good questions that actually just popped up. We're going to link back in with both Kristian, Colin, and Ben about the single family rental side. That's kind of stirred up some questions here. The first one from Matt Trout is, I've heard that local property tax rates prevent North Texas from being an attractive region for single family rent, but sounds like that is not the case, ? Whoever wants to jump in and.
I can't speak to the property tax component. I can tell you, if you think about single family rental versus garden apartments versus Texas wrap, the 2 land transactions, one in Grand Prairie and one in Tribute, are all, the transactions are a higher price per door than you would otherwise see. So the guys that are developing these are clearly factoring in the tax side. So that's the lens that I look at it through.
My only speculation on what that topic is that the homestead exemption for property taxes, I guess, would not be available for a renter of a home. So that may enter into the lease rate, but I don't know the details of that business model, but that's a possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then one more on that topic. This comes from Jordan Snyder from Banco ZK. He asked, Kristian, I currently have a home unit deal you just described. What do you think of the future success of these types of deals? More specifically, what do you think about this type of product on the periphery of a market that is currently pricing out millennials and other groups with a traditional multifamily product?
Traditional multifamily product. See, I see it as somewhere in between a traditional multifamily and owning. So to me, it's the executive, certainly the product that we're looking at, and I'm going to guess Colin as well for sort of the level of development that they've got going on up in Frisco, is it's sort of the executive person that wants the 2-3 bedroom, 2-story, 18 to 2,500 square feet, but have the flexibility to rent and not own. And so, the groups that we've talked to, kind of like Colin described, there were 4 groups that came to us all really from January on, and the conversation really started heating up once I started working out of the home office, which was fascinating. And each of the groups had a different sort of offering. It was a different way to skin the cat, if you will. One of the groups, and I'll tell, all of the groups are coming to the table with really quality, I'll call them regional builders. So people that you would know of and say, hey, they build a very good custom home or a good production home. So it's not, that's the first piece, is there's some comfort in the product that's being created. And when you're doing a master plan community, you want to make sure that what's being created isn't just garbage, because you still have the rest of your community you got to live with. We're at a bit of a different end of the spectrum than Colin is. We're at the tail end of the tribute. We started it in mid 2000s, and here we are. We're probably down to our last phase of single family lots, and we've got some condo, golf villa, some sort of non-traditional land left to develop. But we'll have 2,500 single family lots in the ground when we're done, and we're at the back end of it. So this is sort of an interesting time to be introducing rental product, because it's got the connotation, right? Whereas I'd actually say Colin's in a really good position, because you can, and we're also sort of down to our last pieces. Whereas while they're doing their master planning at the front end, you can find the right spot. It's maybe a little less challenging, if you will, relative to the people that have purchased out there and have a perception of this is our community. Again, we know that there's a rental, single family rental component going to be in Heartland, as I understand it. A couple of Republic developments. So it's good developers in good master plan communities. Each is a different product type, though. The ones we considered, and really it boiled down to, it wasn't so much about land price, it was the product. So when you look at this, you'll see 2-car garage. Again, it's sort of 15 to, they're telling us 18 to 2,500 square feet. And they believe that home, and you wouldn't know it, but it's not on a platted lot. It's one commercial lot that will have 100 and some odd homes on it, but you won't know the difference. Whereas a couple of the other groups were probably a little more, I'll call them horizontal horizontal garden apartments, where it was 1- and 2-story, but there might be in 2 or 4 packs, no garages, sort of parking fields with carports. So again, a very different feel, and that might fit better in a different community. We didn't want that in the tribute, or even to consider it in the tribute. So again, we'll have to do a little bit of PD amending, but we've got a multifamily component. But when we put the PD in place 10 years ago, nobody contemplated single family rental as multifamily, right? So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think it depends on where your development is. If you are sort of on the edge, the tribute now is kind of an infill. So it's really not on the edge anymore. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, Lee, I'll add to that. We launched a single family rental platform late last year, and I think we'll have 3 developments that kicked off this time next year. And ours are more the single platted lots that operate as a rental community. One of the takeaways, like Kristian said, is being sensitive to ACC guidelines. But the other thing is that the maintenance is vastly improved from sometimes regular home ownership, because you'll have one maintenance company doing all that softscape maintenance, and can feel really nice. But I think the demand's there, and from a macro standpoint, with companies coming to our DFW market, you're going to have people that say, I'd rather rent for a year and get the lay of the land and then make my purchase. And so it can help the other builders in the community be a feeder for them. So it's a new concept. They've done it on the East Coast very successfully, and I think it's the right thing for Dallas-Fort Worth.
Yeah, I will add to Ben's point, and this is one of the selling features of the group that we finally selected. And again, the builder for this group is a really high quality Dallas builder. We're not done the deal yet, so I don't want to say anything. But one of their selling points, to Ben's point, was, again, the advantage of being early in a development is their statistics and in most of their developments tend to be in the Arizona area, but there's the stickiness factor of those that rent that want to convert to be a buyer tend to stay in that community and buy in that community. So as Ben says, it's a nice little entree. Again, at the Tribute, we're a little more mature in the life cycle of the development, so that's not quite as key a piece for us. But again, for Ben's world and for what Colin's doing up in Frisco, that right group that can actually be a feeder for the buy side of their portfolio in that development is a nice added feature.
Great.
So can I ask one question to the guys on that topic real quick? It may not be relevant, but I've heard that type of product might be conducive to kind of a grandparent type situation next to a family with grandchildren. I don't know if you've run into that or if that's been a relevant concept that you've seen.
Well, Perry, we're early, so we don't have on the ground yet. I can tell you at the Tribute, there are more than a handful of families that have multi-generational members living in the community in different homes.
Okay.
It doesn't surprise me if you wanted perhaps a grandparent that again wanted maybe a little more flexibility than making the capital investment of yet another house. So that it makes perfect sense what you're saying.
Yeah, I've heard a little bit of that. Yeah.
Let's turn to multi. It was mentioned there as well. And Ben, I want to get to your project in Victory Park, the Victor. It's hard to miss, certainly driving around. It's an irreplaceable location in Victory, right across from American Airlines Center and next to the W there. First, we'd just love an update on the project, and again, we can kind of get to the COVID effects of that. But yeah, it's an amazing project you guys have there.
Yeah, well, the first bullet we dodged was that we originally named it 3039 Olive for the address, and we changed it to the Victor. Just talked to our partners. Thankfully, our partner liked the name because he's a Michigan alumni, so so that worked out for him. But they changed the name to Novinsky Way. It felt like real quickly. So yeah, it's at Novinsky Way and Victory Park Lane. And we deliver in early 21, and it's just going to be a phenomenal asset for the Metroplex. Really luxury residences, and the average square feet is about 1,200 per unit. But really, it's more of a I call it a soft museum feel, and the art in the asset is going to be something to come and see. So we'll be putting the finishes on it later this year, and I think we're topping out in 2 weeks, so we're excited about that.
Good, congrats. I know everyone here is constantly evaluating new opportunities and sticking to multifamily in particular. I'm curious, one of the big issues that we talk to our clients all the time about are the capital markets right now, and just, there's a big difference of opinion depending on who you go to, also on the equity side of things. Multifamily in particular, have the capital stacks changed, or I think they've become more difficult? Certainly there's more issues to work through, but I'd love, from your opinion and from what you're talking to people around the country, how that has changed over the last 3 to 4 months as we look out on new developments.
Yeah, I think, different than the GFC, this time around, the Fed was more prepared. And, there's an old saying on Wall Street, you can't fight the Fed. And so there is a lot more dry powder out there, but people are cautious. They're trying to figure out, when the vaccine comes out. And I think that just with the volatility of that unknown, there's a lot of wait and see attitude, and there's certain product types that are taking it harder than others, obviously, with hospitality and retail. Colin and I were talking about that the other day. There is a lot of different capital stacks that are watching those two asset classes. On the multifamily side, there was a lot in production, I would say. And so a lot of that locally was anticipation of a lot of our demographics that continue to surge for, a number of reasons. But I think, deals need to have a good narrative to get done. That's always been the case, but in times like this, it's a more narrow fairway. But honestly, things change every 3 weeks. It feels like with the COVID cases in the market. So I think it's a good wait and see and let us digest some of the supply that's coming on.
Yeah.
So I have one data point for you on that. I had a client that actually had already lined up the equity and started a development probably in April, believe it or not. And that's all going well. But since then, I'm hearing from clients that really there's kind of a question mark with the appraisal process, because there's some uncertainty about the collectability on the income streams, no matter what the pro forma looks like. And I think it's putting the appraisers in a position where they're trying to figure out how to factor in COVID based upon future income streams impacting value.
Yeah. Yeah. Really, really interesting for sure. Colin, I also wanted to ask you, not too far away from the Victor is your North End redevelopment, which is still, I believe, in the planning phases, but again, another amazing site. And one of the three major things you're going to be working on for quite a long time over there at Hunt. I don't know how much digging in you've done already on that site, but would love kind of an overview, if you have some, of what you're expecting from it and what we might be able to see over the next decade.
I've got some 3D models sitting right here next to me, but like Ben said, it feels like things change every 3 weeks, and we are looking at the master plan for North End right now. We started looking at it in earnest, basically the end of February, early March, and maybe you had a thought of what the density could be there, what the mix of uses could be there pre-COVID, and thinking about it now, I'll call this mid-COVID. Certainly, it's going to change, right? If we try to if we went out, we're going to need to get rezoned. So ask for more density, but what would be that density? And, I think density is a different word now than it was pre-COVID. And I'm not sure, I don't think it's a bad word, but I think in some ways, it has a different tinge to it. I guess to digress for a second, I personally think North Texas is going to stand to benefit quite a bit from what's going on. I think we're like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, with respect to density, not too hot, not too cold, just the right. And if you're coming from the coast and you depend on mass transit and high rise, for office and for multifamily, I think you're going to like North Texas, because if you are okay with, density, uptown, downtown has it, it's not too much. If you're not, and you want to spread out a little bit more, either at your home in a single family for rent or multifamily or office, we have lots of great options in the suburbs where people can spread out. And so, at any rate, thinking about what the ultimate density for North End will be, to get to, let's just say 5 million feet, which would be 10 to 1 FAR, you're talking about, hospitality, which makes you gulp right now to think about developing a new hotel. Quite a bit of retail, obviously, and then condos, which are always sort of an open question in Dallas, but certainly you wouldn't underwrite right now. And then, how much office can you really think you can do? It's just, it's no way to really know at this moment in time. And so, kind of back to Perry's point about his own real estate situation for his own company, I think all these companies are going through this right now. How many changes do we really make at this moment in time? How much do we really spend to do this or that? How long can we wait for a vaccine? How long can we wait to, come back to the office? These are huge questions. Fortunately, I don't know any of the answers, but I'm wrestling with it just like everybody else.
Sure.
Yeah, one of the questions we just got in has to do with those of you that develop office, which is a majority here. Do you see clients doing more of individual office setups as opposed to open office space? That obviously was a large trend recently over the last decade. And has COVID impacted the structure of the spaces?
You know, I'll just real fast. I think just with everything, you know, the pendulum swings this way, that way. I think the pendulum was already coming back from all open, you know, benching, blah, blah, blah. I think people were already starting to rebel against 90 square feet per person, you know, right on top of each other. So this is kind of pushed the pendulum back a little bit. But kind of like what I just said, I don't know, you know, how permanent that is. I mean, what if we get a vaccine tomorrow, you know, and it's okay to be within 6 feet from each other? So I do think we're going to naturally have more space per person. I think there's going to be more shared space, but I don't think companies are necessarily going to lease more space. I think work from home is going to be a more permanent component of work. But you know, who knows? I mean, again,
I can expand a little bit on our thought process. We were not focused on shrinking the amount of square feet per person, but we were focused on having more collaborative environment, which looks a little bit more open, but there's a lot of what we call huddle rooms for not assigned meeting rooms, but open meeting rooms where people need to, you know, spend an hour going through a project and what we call huddle up for periods of time. So it wasn't about trying to shrink the number of square feet per head. Well, we wanted to be as efficient as possible, but we wanted the space to be open enough to encourage more collaborative interaction, and we kind of counterbalance that openness with these huddle rooms that you can go in and focus and have technology in and so forth. So, and again, we're looking at a 10-year commitment, so we didn't want to overly obsess about COVID at the moment. We couldn't ignore it, but you know, we had to make a longer term decision. So we kind of stayed that course for the most part.
Yeah, Lee, I would say when this first started, I feel like I was on 4 Zoom calls a week trying to pontificate about this answer. And people said, oh, it needs to be less dense. And, you know, and then I said, well, if you make it less dense, then you would move out further and less amenities. And so where I've kind of come in the near term is that I think that the more boutique office buildings that have great amenities nearby, not just in the building, but nearby, I think that those are going to be the winners in the near term. And, you know, a classic example is one of our partners is from New York, and, you know, with their commute time and the mass transit and then getting up to a top of a building, you know, all the hurdles to jump through are just exhausting. And so they are, you know, whereas you have in Texas, you have companies trying to get back to work. I mean, a lot of us are trying to get back on the beginning of June, maybe June 15th, and we punted it. But in the Northeast markets, they weren't even thinking that. I mean, for them, it was 2021. And so everyone's kind of moved out. And then I think nationwide, it's kind of created this surge for second homes and right sizing your primary home. And so you can look at a lot of different ways, but I do think that more of a boutique office building, if a tenant can find that, would be more advantageous in the near term.
Okay. And one, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I do think there's also going to be more build-to-suits than maybe there would have been, because I think people are going to want to try to control their own space. You know, you're hearing in the coastal markets, companies, if they are coming back to work, trying to have dedicated elevators and dedicated this and that within a multi-tenant building. So I think it's going to lead people to just do more build-to-suits, even if they're not huge, you know, 50, 75, 150,000 foot build-to-suits. Still close to amenities. To Ben's point, you know, good location is a good location, but I think controlling your environment is going to be a big factor.
Yeah. And then piggybacking off that real quick, I got a question from John Altschuler from Outco, and he wants us to prognosticate when is the earliest you project most Americans will be back in the office not wearing a mask, and how do you think about that?
When's the vaccine coming?
Yeah, right.
I mean, I think that's it.
Yeah.
That'll start giving people comfort that there's an answer to the problem.
Yeah.
Until that time, you know, here we look at this group on the call. We're sort of as a company prepared to start coming in the office in a very controlled, planned,
Right.
scheduled way starting next week. And I think while we're on the phone, I think the governor's even sent out a notice that there's going to be a bit of a pause now on this next phase because of the surge here in Texas. So I think it was said earlier, stuff's happening real time. And so, John, it's a great question, but I think it's all about how protected are we from this particular strain, so the vaccine, and then how, sadly, I'm no doctor, I'm a real estate guy, but how might it mutate? What does it morph into? I think that's when you'll start to see comfort and people feeling no masks are necessary, and I can get on the elevator with me and my 15 floor mates and feel comfortable, right? So it's human nature. When do I start feeling comfortable?
All right,
If I had to take a wild guess, I'd say it's 6 months after the vaccine that people really start feeling that it's broad-based used and the masks are not really essential.
Yeah.
Just go stick on golf courses. It's nice and safe out there.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Speaking of golf courses, I think a bunch of us are avid golfers, and I wanted to talk to Colin certainly about the PGA headquarters. And you know, we talk about relocations to North Texas, and that is such a monumental move here for PGA championships, for potential Ryder Cups, for the amount of visibility that brings to this area and what you guys are able to do in the fields again up in Frisco. First of all, congratulations. I'm beyond excited for it, but would love, you know, your thoughts also on, you've done some really big projects previously at KDC, and this is another huge project that will really stand the test of time in North Texas. So just kind of an overview of where you guys stand right now on that project.
Well, they all did it before I got there, so I can't take any credit. And also, you know, we should note that Hunt sold land to Omni, Stillwater, and TRT, and they're the ones developing, in addition to the PGA, you know, developing the golf courses. There's a 500-room hotel. Obviously, there's a headquarters, and there's retail associated with all that. So, you know, like everybody knows, development is a team sport, and you know, what's going on up at Fields is certainly a huge team, and that includes the city of Frisco. You know, they're very heavily involved in everything that goes on up there, and so they should be commended too, because it is a public-private partnership, and there was a lot of work from everybody to get that here, and there's a lot of work left to be done. You know, there's a lot of roads that need to get built, a lot of sewers, you know, the nitty-gritty of master plan development that now is all in process. And, you know, on our side, you know, we have a pretty big team as well, and we're adding to it day by day, you know, like we mentioned with single family for rent, and, you know, we're going to bring on an office development partner here pretty soon. We're going to start looking for a multifamily partner here pretty soon. So it is exciting. You know, as Kristian mentioned before, it is kind of, it's hard to wrap your mind around 2,000 acres, 2,500 acres, and what will ultimately have 5,000 homes and, you know, almost 10,000 apartments and 6.5 million of commercial space, right? It's just, you know, we have renderings, but it's hard to wrap your mind around that. And so when Kristian says that the tribute has 2,700 homes, I think, did I catch that right?
Close.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, and I think of that as huge. It is huge.
Yeah.
And so that just kind of hit me about, I guess, your first question of me was, how was the job transition? Honestly, we got so busy there at KDC for a while with all the corporate relocations coming to North Texas that I was a little worried that I wouldn't have enough to do in this new role. But like 2,000 acres, I could be on a panel 20 years from now still talking about, what's going on in fields. It's just going to be a lifetime worth of development up there. So anyway, it's fun to come in kind of on the early side of it, and it should be cool what happens up there over the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Looking forward to it.
I think another question that would be great to hear, from all the panelists is just people look to your companies as being some of the, premier real estate companies in North Texas, and understanding where, without giving away info to the kingdom or keys to the kingdom, where opportunity might be out there in the next 5 years. I mean, maybe it's COVID related issues that pop up in the near term, or maybe that's just stuff as we look out over North Texas over the next 5 years. But just an idea of where you guys see, the opportunity in North Texas. I think there's plenty of it for all of us, which is the most exciting part of being in this part of the country. But yeah, Kristian, if you wouldn't mind, jumping in first, and we'll just kind of go down the line quickly.
Sure. I think as a company, we're a small company. We tend to get involved in some large, complicated deals. So we like that. We like complexity. We like challenges. And probably one area that we really have, for those that know us, really sort of have found a love, and that's South Dallas. From the Cedar South, high-speed rail if we're successful. But, part of what we're doing, and it's really a reflection of Jack Matthews, and kind of his personal ethos, and it really becomes a reflection of this company, are things that we're doing there that really are completely off the radar. People don't know about it. We don't talk about it because we're we market poorly, but we're okay with that. It's what you do, not what you say. And we're doing a ton of stuff in South Dallas that you'll never really know about, but it's really all about trying to contribute to the fabric of the southern sector. The Black Lives Matter topic that's sort of front and center today and the last several weeks. We often get comments on, well, what's the company position? And I really say, look at our record. Look at what we're doing on MLK. Look at what we're doing around Fair Park and in Mill Cities. Look at what we're doing in the Cedars, which now, 20 years ago, people said you're crazy. And now they say, well, that's not South Dallas. Actually, I heard a prior mayor say that, which is really funny to hear. Last night we held a function at Gillies that was really all about trying to have a conversation in this regard. So Mark Cuban was there. Several other sort of more prominent folks were there, really talking about having a dialogue and a conversation. And so, it's an easy question with a really long answer that's not simple, but it's just, as a company, still to try to do some good things in the southern sector, whether it's building homes that are affordable that nobody will know it's Matthews, but it's sort of what we want to do and how we want to do it, who we've partnered with down there. So a group called Urban Specialists they're a nonprofit. Their mission is to try to help sort of previously incarcerated men and women get back in real mainstream. Well, it's about sort of helping them realize that there's life after having had problems. And so that's their mission. And so we've partnered with them on buying some land, on buying some lots, on developing the lots. We hope to make a little bit of profit because some of that profit will go back to the nonprofit, but it's not you won't hear about it like the Tribute, but it's just sort of little pieces at a time. We've got a few of those in the southern sector. So that'll keep us busy for a while. And again, really not on the radar, Lee, just sort of really under the radar, but just, again, trying to do the right thing and as a company and being consistent with what we've done the last 20 years in the southern sector. So
yeah,
lots of more interesting, flashy projects, but I think that's one in particular. It's a little timely to discuss right now. So yeah, that's one.
And your Galbraith development as well, which we didn't mention, right next to the old Dallas High School, that has affordability component as well. And that, the things you guys have done have greatly improved the city. And I know your work with Trek, that's where we know each other through. So, it's just the stuff that Trek's done in South Dallas has been monumental as well. And so I think both of you deserve a lot of credit for the focus and energy put down south, because it's well deserved.
Thanks.
Colin, where do you see opportunity, my friend? As if you don't already have enough on your plate. I know you got some good land already tied up, so I don't know if you need too much more opportunity.
No, we're looking. I mean, honestly, I thought there was going to be more distress than we've seen so far. I mean, certainly, if you have the stomach to buy a hotel or retail at the moment, I'm sure there's deals to be had. We don't, but office, multifamily, land, it just hadn't really, I don't know, I mean, knock on wood, but it just hadn't been a ton of distress. So look, we're pretty heavily focused on North Texas. We're not really looking Austin, Houston, anywhere outside of Texas. I'm a city kid. I'm a big believer in urban areas. I think, my other personal opinion is I think we draw too many arbitrary lines about, what's uptown and what's Victory and what's Turtle Creek and what's South Dallas and what's not South Dallas and what's uptown and what's downtown. I think our urban core, as that goes, the rest of our region goes, and it's not a zero-sum game. So I think there's opportunity in us becoming more of a tech hub and getting more of a reputation as a tech hub. That was what I thought was going to happen this year, given some recent announcements in the tech sector coming to this market. I think once they realize they can't work from home forever, they'll probably look at North Texas some more. So that's where I think the opportunity is, more so than a specific submarket.
Yeah. Ben, how about you as you see the landscape, as you look out over things in North Texas?
Yeah, so good points by the other panelists. A couple of things. I think that just in the Southwest and here in DFW, I think that a micro neighborhood creation will really kick off. It's already done that in certain pockets, but finding those other nodes, and we really focused on it on some of our recent developments, is bolting on those different uses, and it's not just in the super core areas. I mean, we purchased the Inwood Trade Center at 35 in Inwood. And if you look at that has retail, has some light industrial, could have some last mile industrial. And, you look out in the future, 10, 15 years from now, that may be another pocket of growth. And so just understanding those narratives and planning your developments around the future like that and being nimble is interesting. And then on the retail front, I think that, that one's really interesting. I mean, we've seen the e-commerce come, but when you look at these regional malls, I mean, we could look back, 5, 6 years from now, and maybe 1 out of 5 is really thriving compared to, you look back 10 years ago and they were all making it, and what those malls become is really interesting to me. Specifically on first and second floor malls, the second floor is going to have a really hard time being successful. And so what does that space become? And so I think the municipalities will be involved in that and look to find some creative solutions there. But yeah, I think there's going to be opportunities in our market just with all the influx of demographics.
Yeah.
So Lee, let me just throw in a
Sure.
little thought about the future. I'm not qualified to talk about the next the next hot area. I'll leave that up to my clients. But I have had conversations with them, and as we look to the future, just thinking through when we do get on the other side of COVID and we do have to start thinking about these deficits, the real estate lobby has always been very strong, but regulation and legislation we need to watch carefully. The real estate industry might be a target for revenue raising in some form or fashion. And yeah, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer in this conversation, but we're thinking about it, watching it, and have to see how the tea leaves kind of play out.
Yeah.
But I'm a big fan of North Texas real estate, so I'm sure
Good.
you guys will find the right spots.
All right, one final quick question coming in from Jake Sigler of our MedCorp partners. This kind of gets back to one of our earlier topics, but is anyone actively pursuing modular housing or manufactured housing for rent?
We aren't, but actually
We aren't.
We have a partner that is in the Southwest. So, but we as Matthews, we're not actively.
Gotcha.
We looked at it a while ago, and it was more expensive than we thought with the foundations and such. But I think as that gets more efficient, maybe that could be a better play in the future.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything.
All right. Well, the hour unfortunately has come and gone. It was a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate everyone joining us. Kristian Teleki from Matthews Southwest, Ben Brewer from Hines, Colin Fitzgibbons from Hunt, and of course Perry Kaufman from Armanino. Great conversation. If anyone has direct questions or anything, I'm sure, please send me or Anita an email. We'd be happy to connect you in with these guys if there was more conversation to be had. And again, really appreciate what all of you have done for North Texas and your time here today.
Thanks to everybody.
Thanks for hosting us.
Yeah.
You got it.
Thank you.
Have a great
Bye
one.
now.
See ya.